Okay, I think that's everyone for now. Robbie, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Should we get started?
Yep.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so thanks everyone and welcome. Today is the third in our series of open design sessions with today's topic being training skills and collaboration. Just to let you know, which was mentioned in the meeting invite, that the call will be recorded, but a link to the recording and slides will be made available after the session. Quick introduction from myself. For anyone who's not attended before, my name's Robbie Hodson. I'll host the session. My role for Glass Futures is project engineer for the St. Helens plant, which we'll go into some detail about shortly. Today's format will be a panel type discussion. We'll have a question and answer sessions afterwards. If you've got any questions during the session, just raise your hands and we'll ask, or you can type in the chat option. Just remember to mention who your question's aimed at. If we don't get time to answer everyone's questions, we'll make sure we get a response after the session. Our email address will be in the slides, and we can discuss any of today's topics, any future topic suggestions or membership options. As always, we're very keen for everyone's input and interaction, so please ask as many questions as you can. I'm going to hand you over to Aston Fuller, our General Manager, just to give the quick overview of Glass Futures in the St. Helens plant. Over to you, Aston.
Okay, thanks. So just as a matter of course, one of the important things for Glass Futures is their antitrust and competition law items. So, this is a forum to discuss cross-sector collaboration. And as such, what's important to us is that, confidentiality and commerciality is really at the front of all of our thought processes as part of an organization that looks to pull together different groups that, these things can often come up. So, the terminology used sometimes are going to be industry and sector specific. Some of it might not be as clear or as understood, but any questions that are in the chat box, we'll look to try and pick those up. If there's things that people don't understand, to make sure we cover those off. And just to ensure that we've got the chance for the panel to talk and to go through things, we'll have everyone muted as part of the discussion. Put any questions in the chat box, and then we can actually ask people to unmute themselves to actually ask those questions. So thanks. Just jump onto the next slide, please, Alana. So I really want to introduce Glass Futures, but talk a little bit about glass specifically. What we will see is that the issues that glass faces are commonly shared across many different industries and sectors. Materials really have been a foundation of civilization for the thousands of years, and what we're seeing is a massive shift in technology and industry around us, and it really is changing at an ever faster rate. Einstein once said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, and this is something very dear to my heart. I think it's a really important thing to understand that we do have to think about approaching things in a different way. Glass as a material is under threat, as are many other materials when assessing the carbon content of them as individual materials. I'm a lover of glass. I've been heavily involved in the glass industry all of my working life. And what we are seeing is that there's a huge amount of positive benefits from it as a material. And lots of different material have different positives. The reality is we have to understand that carbon is an issue in the world we live in, and we have to think about new and different ways to approach reducing the carbon content in all of the materials we manufacture, and specifically for those with energy intensive processes that require a lot of generally fossil fuels and natural gas to actually produce them as materials. Glass Futures believes that the approach to resolving some of these issues is about cross-sector collaboration to really drive disruption in the marketplace. That disruption will be born of people from different backgrounds, different experiences coming together and actually allowing us to approach problems in a different way. And that really is what the spirit of Glass Futures is about. It's about pulling people together from different sectors, different experiences to actually catalyze changes in the marketplace around us. Just next, please, Alana. So this is why Glass Futures set out on a very important mission to generate a global centre of excellence to really allow glass to become the low carbon material of choice in the future and increase its use throughout society. But really a lot of the things we're looking to do within Glass Futures are relevant across the many other sectors that involve energy intensive industries. We think that by working collaboratively across research and development is that we can bring new ideas to the forefront faster. We can apply a commercial thought process to the research and development carried out, and actually enable it to be taken away from an academic concept on a piece of paper all the way through to industry. In particular, today's design session is to talk about training, skills and collaboration. And what's interesting is that when we look at the change required in processes and in industry, we also need to think about the application of that change to people as well. And I think this is an important session to discuss not just where technology is going, not just where future business models are, but where the future of the people that we rely on in industry to make these things happen actually come to pass. Society needs change and society needs technology to change, but part of that change is going to be about changing the mindsets of people, understanding that new technology requires new skills, people to be encouraged to come into an industry and actually think creatively and help change the industry that it's in. And what's important, we think, is that the approach for Glass Futures, which is a not-for-profit research and technology organisation, is an important approach to sit and actually pull together those players, both in industry, in academia, in the public sector, to actually come together and solve these problems as a whole to allow change to happen as we go forward. Alana, just jump to next slide, please. So for those that aren't aware, and I won't go into a huge amount of detail about this because we have covered it in some of the other open design sessions that we've had, but just to give a very brief overview, Glass Futures is creating a global centre of excellence for R&D in glass. This is also about innovation, and it's also about training and skills development. The issues that industry often has is that it has very large assets that are driven for the highest amount of efficiency. And as such, the risk aversion of industry is there for a reason. It's risk averse with its capital assets because it has to deliver a product for its customers. This is where there's really a gap in the market at the moment when it comes to taking ideas and concepts through the development platform and actually putting them out into industry. What's interesting is you can apply the same thought process for technology development to people development as well. So Glass Futures is creating a globally unique open access research and development capability in the form of a pilot scale, what is very big when it comes to academia, but small when it comes to industry, a furnace to allow us to bridge the gap between technology developments in the lab and actually applying those out in industry. And actually, when you think about that capability of having something that looks and feels like a real industrial facility, but that is designed as a training asset, that is designed as a research and development platform, it allows you to really, in the design sessions that we've used before, take your production hat off, not to walk in and think about this in a traditional industrial factory setting, but to think about this as an opportunity to explore new avenues for research, new avenues for development, and a place to trial new technology. An important part of those new technologies to think about is digital skills in particular. And I think this is going to be a big topic for discussion today, but really about the way that people interact with processes. Automation is really, really important. But what we do see as automation is born into industry and actually comes into the workplace is that the skills requirement for people to understand digital technologies is something that has never been as pertinent as it is today. The facility itself has been heavily supported by a number of public and private partners. I think what's really important to recognise from our perspective is that by pulling together those private and public and academic partners together, we can have a opportunity to do something that's never been done before. And we really see the development at St Helens as an opportunity to actually take people from the local region and the wider city region in and around Liverpool and find a good development pathway for those into highly skilled and highly paid jobs available all the way around the world, but also as a chance to attract international talent, people that are at the top of their game in industry around the world to actually come and deliver training and skills development to the next generation of engineers, scientists and business leaders that the foundation industries, of which glass is one of many, including steel, cement, chemicals, paper and refractories and ceramics, is that they all need the same skills development in people and very similar technology developments together as well. We believe that the opportunity that is in front of us over the course of the next couple of years with the facility due to open in 2023 is that we can bring together these groups talk at this early stage in this development process where we have, a good amount of lead-in time to actually lay down the foundations and plans for how do we approach training and development differently. And we've got a clear development path for approaching innovation differently. What we need to pull together and what I'd like to take away from this session personally is the opportunity to spot where should the focus be, especially over the course of these next couple of years, to make sure that we can actually utilize this platform in a way that's never been available to the industry before. And when I say industry, I also mean glass as well as other energy intensive sectors and other things that rely on technology and skills development. So that's a brief overview of the facility and where I think the opportunities are. I think the panel that's here today, and I'll hand over to you shortly, Mark. I think the panel that's here today is a really good cross section of those different partners and different sections of people in society that have got a vested interest in coming and working collaboratively to actually develop something that is stronger than the sum of its parts. And I'd just like to say a big thanks to all of the speakers that are here as part of the panel discussion today, to actually talk a bit about what this opportunity means to them and how we actually pull together those different experiences to make this opportunity really as powerful as it can be on paper. So I hope that's been a good introduction. Mark, I know you're leading the panel discussion today, so I'll hand over to you and just say thanks to everyone for coming. And again, thanks to the panelists for agreeing to speak today.
Okay, let's start. So we're in a very interesting place, really, in that we're in a potentially post-COVID world, and that has opened the way that we deal with digital technology, how we approach the world of work. Remote working is more the norm. Office spaces, designs, the way we approach training, the way we approach recruitment, all of it has been affected. And this is, if you like, a major paradigm shift that has been accelerated by COVID and the changes we've had to make in society. And this gives us an ideal opportunity to look at the way we train, the way we outsource skills and bring them in. So using the people we have from industry in the panel, what I'd probably like to do is to talk about skills deficits first. So what do we see in the foundation industries as the major skills deficits? So I'm going to actually pass the baton to Simon to start with, because he's been able to identify some very clear skills. Okay, Simon.
Thanks, Mark. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm a bit of an interloper here, as my background is in steel, but I represent the UK Steel R&D Committee, which draws together the steel companies from across the UK. And actually, we became involved in this by working together through the foundation industries concept and bringing together concrete, glass, ceramics, other materials, brick, and steel itself. And what struck me in having these meetings to kind of bring people together is we've got quite a lot of common issues, and in particular on the skill set. Maybe the first one is more important to me than it is to people in glass, but actually it's an issue to do with metallurgy and training. But if I make it more general, I think the point about the foundation industries is they're perhaps not always considered to be the sexiest of industries for people to move into. And certainly in my business, you only have to read the press to see that steel only ever gets bad news. There's never any good news. So making sure that the fundamental training and the scientific training is present for people to come into the foundation industry is really important. For me, that's metallurgy, but materials in general, I think, for the foundation industries is important. But I think what we're finding in this kind of modern world really is more than just that, because actually there are still good scientists around, of course, but increasingly we're moving into a world of digital technology. And for me, that puts forward quite a number of quite significant challenges for our heavy industry that we work in. We've often got, unlike this nice shiny picture you see in front of you, but we've often got quite old plant. It's expensive plant, so it's a heritage and a legacy behind it. Probably not really designed to take the kind of sensors and technology that we might want to have today if you were building it. So there's a really quite interesting phenomena around working in Industry 4 concepts and looking at the digital technologies, the sensor technologies, the connectivity between different parts of the plant and the process, and relating those to the product that actually goes through that process. And so for me, that's kind of a second piece in there. It's pulling together the materials bit along with the digital technology and sensors. And kind of the third bit for me is actually statistics, because what I can see in my own industry is we're doing a lot of work to become more digital and draw our data together. And you do end up with massive databases, but actually our traditional way of looking at data has to change. There are new approaches, there are new computer technologies to allow us to do this, but we have the opportunity to look at very, very different sets of data, very large sets of data, actually look for patterns. And I can remember being at a conference some time ago where actually I'm struck by somebody who was presenting about how they analysed mobile phone chatter. It's probably slightly dubious maybe in the terms of it was all about kind of security and whether you could kind of pick up keywords and things like that in there. And it struck me there's a lot to learn from other sectors, whether it be how Tesco use Clubcard and all the data they use or that they pick up about us every time we go shopping, to how people are looking at vast amounts of data, say in the security industry and looking for patterns. Well, I'm looking for patterns in blast furnace data or electric arc furnace data or rolling mill data from equipment that's not really designed to have those sensor technologies in its first place. And so that's a really interesting challenge, I think, for people coming into the foundation industry. And I think that's pretty common across all of us that work in this sector.
Okay, so what we're saying, Simon, is that we're looking for data scientists, we're looking for people who can handle automation, people who, if you like, are skilled engineers as well, who can bridge the gap between the data and the process.
Yes,
yeah.
I think that's right. And I think maybe one of the advantages of having a facility like the Glass Futures facility is you can actually bring people in who can experiment on real plants, but in the safety of being in a plant that's not a production plant, and learn and experiment with that. So we're already working with Glass Futures on looking at burner technology, for example. And that will kind of cause us to look at things in quite a different way. But we've got to do it in a way that's quite rapid, I think, because the world's changing and competition's changing. But we've also got to think that actually we don't have enormous amount of money in these sectors to be able to invest in large amounts. So if we use our money wisely and allow the plants to process for customers, I think that's a really interesting challenge for everyone.
Okay, I'd like to throw the baton over to Lee. Lee, before you start, would you kindly do an introduction as well? The same for the other panelists.
Yeah, of course. Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Lee Wright, and I currently work for NSERC, and I am responsible for the talent and skills agenda across all our plants. For those who don't know NSERC, we are predominantly a glass manufacturing container glass organisation based in Elton in Cheshire, Daylin in Northern Ireland, and in Milan in Italy. So really, really pleased to be here, but just listening to Simon and his perspective, I have to agree with some of the trends and some of the key areas that could be a deficit in the future. And I think linking back to the comment on societal change, we've got significant developments with technology. We've got Brexit to consider, and coming out of COVID and working out what that future landscape looks like. I think if you asked me that same question, Mark, maybe 18 months ago, half my answer would have been the same. But now looking ahead to the future, considering some of those new nuances in terms of what that looks like is interesting. So, I mean, for me, just to support that is around that data management. So we know that as we introduce new technology to meet consumer demand, to work more efficiently, the technology that we bring on and procure will require and produce additional data. So the question will be is how can we use that data, and do we have the skills in the business or in the sector to scientifically use that data to project and forecast for trends for the benefit of the commercial world, but also for individual businesses. Linking to the technology piece as well around software engineers. So we know we've got off-the-shelf technology that we can buy, but then another question would be around how could we support the bespokeness of some of our technology packages that we might need to develop. Software engineers could be something which we might need to see an increase of in the next kind of 5 to 10 years. And then I suppose finally around a big hot topic is around renewable and sustainable energy, and what does that mean from a skill perspective. We know that recently universities have started to develop and define and deliver some degrees around sustainable energy and renewable engineering, but are we at that table in designing those academic qualifications to ensure that when those graduates do finish those renewable and sustainable degrees, are they going to be as effective as they can when they enter the workplace? So I suppose the landscape is still unknown or unterritoried land, but it's interesting to see what the rest of the panelists think as well, but definitely in line with Simon.
Okay, just on that, I've got a private message from Animesh, who just wanted to pop in and say a couple of comments. Animesh, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you. I'm professor at University of Leeds. This is my second time. I missed the February one somehow. Lee, you're making very, very important point, and so is Simon. And I would say a few things. There are logistic issues with the way we teach in the university. Unless and until there is a serious intervention from industry, I don't think our curriculum structure is likely to change significantly. And I think for people to come out and tell that this is what we want, we are happy to incorporate you as a part of our advisory board, because we do have curriculum advisory board, and that's the place you can really make a change. Secondly, the teaching and learning committees of the university is a very powerful body. And if you make a voice there, it will be definitely heard. And the biggest challenge we feel, say for example, I am in the School of Chemical and Process Engineering. We don't have enough space to accommodate, say, software learning, data analytics, etc., etc. And I think the best way to teach that is to institute projects which interfaces with industry, like glass futures or a pilot scale facilities, where students can go and do measurements. I do that in the area of medicine because we are better aligned there. And it is an equally challenging field, medicine, because we gather patient data and look at the analytics with the help from census technology, the data which is in the histopathology, for example. So we can learn from that area of medicine and implement a strategy also for TFI. And that's what I would say. So 2 messages: definitely intervene with the universities and make an impact there by approaching the senior executives of the university. And second is how we can learn from other sectors which are much more advanced in this area. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Animesh. Tracy, I'm going to just bring you in now. If you'd like to introduce yourself, and then I think you wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the points that Professor Jai had made.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Tracy Mawson. I'm Chief Executive of St Helens Chamber. For those of you who don't know us, we're a large not-for-profit in St Helens. We're a traditional chamber with a sort of policy and events side of things, but we've also for the last 20 years been very active in the field of economic development. So we do an awful lot of business support and business startup, and we're also an independent training provider. So we provide apprenticeships, we deliver traineeships for young people, and we have a large set of teams who work on trying to assist unemployed people, whether they're recently unemployed or long-term unemployed, into work. So I would say we know the local labour market pretty well. I think this is such an interesting discussion. Building on some points that Lee made and also Simon as well, I'd just really like to speak in support of what Professor Jar just said. My point was really about actually sort of throwing out a bit of a challenge to industry, particularly the industries that are represented here on this call, because there are a number of ways in which to get really stuck in to developing the workforce that you need both now and in the future. So Professor Jar has just spoken there about really getting stuck into engagement with university, but some of the things that I was sort of mulling over, and I can talk a bit more about this, is about getting really involved in developing apprenticeship standards and making sure that wherever you're recruiting, there's a local provider who is able to work with you to actually deliver those apprenticeship standards. Going back to a point that that Aston made right at the beginning, it's not just the technical education, is it? It's also the approach to work. So things like the creativity and the innovation and the collaboration skills. And I think really the challenge to industry is to work out how, as a workforce development set of organizations, you really want to invest in stimulating that sort of creative thinking. So is it seminars? How are you going to invest really in developing those capacities across your workforce, and also making sure that that's maintained in the people that you're bringing in? And without wanting to talk too much, I know I've said a few hairs running here. The other things that I think would be really interesting to discuss would be about accessing some of those ignored demographics or some of the sort of workforce potentials that perhaps get overlooked a bit. So recently, over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, we've been running programs around getting veterans into work, and also about getting returners into work. So that's people who've taken a career break, whether it's women who've taken a career break to bring up children, or people with caring responsibilities, or all sorts of reasons. But I think we struggled a little bit to get industry sort of buy-in to some of those programs. Those are quite nascent, those programs. But I think for people who really put some spade work into it, it could pay real dividends. And I think that's also something that people might want to consider. So I know I haven't finished anything off there, and I'm happy to come back, but hopefully that started a few thoughts running. Thank you.
Yeah, certainly. It certainly opens the floor up to the whole thing of diversity and inclusion, and is industry as a whole missing out on certain points of view from those people who traditionally aren't within the heavy industry background, or tend to be overlooked, or it's not a career option for them. I think Sarah had some thoughts on that, and I'd like to sort of bring you in, Sarah, to just talk a little bit about that, if that's okay.
Thanks, Mark. So hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name's Sarah Connolly. I'm an innovation technologist within the Transforming Foundation Industries team of Innovate UK. And so we are part of the funding body that's working to develop the Glass Futures facility. But that's part of a whole package that we're doing to support the foundation industries. So the metals industry, paper industry, cement, ceramics and chemicals, all alongside the glass industry. So we're running some collaborative research and development projects, but we're also looking at sector support in general, because we have identified that there are a lot of challenges that our industries face in working together, but we see that there is huge potential. And I think that's something that's really been identified here, that skills and talent is just one area where there's so much potential for collaboration across our 6 industries. So we're so excited about the Glass Futures facility and all the potential it has. And what we're doing kind of in a wider sense, I guess it's topical at the moment, is we've just run a future skills and talent and ED&I consultation across all of the industries, just trying to get some of the baseline data for where our industries are in the moment, both in terms of their talent and training opportunities, but also in terms of the diversity of the workforce. So we'll be shortly publishing those, and it gives a real insight into where we're at the moment, and some areas that Innovate will be looking to support on. But really, we need industry buy-in for all that we're doing, because we're doing it to support industry. So in terms of the glass industry, some interesting stats that I guess even surprised me. So I've worked in the materials industries for quite a while now, and we're aware that there are challenges that have to be faced in terms of diversity. But through that study, we found 85% of the glass industry have less than 25% of their workforce being female. And that was something that really jumped out to us. There's so much possibility in terms of strengthening your workforce through diversity, and facing gender imbalances is just the first stage in that journey. No businesses that we surveyed had more than 50% women as the workforce. That wasn't really so much of a surprise, but we would like to be in the position in the future where at least some of the businesses are reaching that category. We also looked at age diversity as well across the industries, because we're well aware that there is an aging workforce coming through the industry, and we do need to start some of that knowledge transfer activity and build our younger workforce to get a sustainable future. 37% of the glass industry businesses have no under 25s in their workforce, so no pipeline of talent coming through. And in over 30% of the businesses surveyed, over 50% of their workforce was over 50 years old. So a really aging demographic, and something that we do need to start facilitating a change in sooner rather than later, because there's so much knowledge and process engineering knowledge that's going to be lost very quickly. So we're really keen to support any initiatives that increase that talent pipeline coming through. So they were kind of my diversity stats, but just reflecting on what's been said so far, I mean, in complete agreement with Simon and Lee about the challenges that the glass industry face, and those that are mirrored across the foundation industries. We're seeing a real lack of graduates with the practical hands-on skills, a lack of confidence in a process engineering environment. And that's where a facility like Glass Futures has a huge opportunity to allow placements or projects to work with the local industry to give that hands-on practical training side that isn't possible in a full-time process environment where you are in a production facility. So a big opportunity there. We've also seen a lot of what Simon was reflecting on really we need an overlap of digital skills and material skills and innovation skills in the workforce. And to achieve that, we might need to be a bit more flexible in how we source our workforce coming through. Where are those key skills that can't be taught on the job? And how can we kind of look at different areas of supply and better training on the job across the foundation industries to kind of spread that load of training to give a more rounded workforce? Because we're also quite aware that employees aren't looking for a single business to join when they leave their formal training and stay in forever. They're looking for much more flexibility in their careers. And how can we build in those flexible, adaptive skills to allow people to move around different businesses and accelerate their career path? So they were just some areas that I wanted to touch on, but a really interesting discussion so far.
Sarah, just a quick question. Are you seeing different requirements in the different generations? For example, millennials and Generation X and Generation Y, have they different requirements in terms of their outlook around what they want out of a career and the career path and progression? Are you seeing?
Yeah, so I think the main change really is the need for a defined, visible career path. I think there's quite an unknown at the moment, getting to the end of especially degrees, as to where a career in each of these industries might lead you, and better transparency, better role models and journeys that can be followed, I think are really helping guide people into the foundation industries. Things that have really jumped out are net zero and sustainability, are really positive images of these industries that people want to go and work in, alongside the digital skills element. That's a really big attraction. So we need to focus all of our careers talks on those areas, rather than talking about energy intensive industries or anything in that kind of a respect. So I think understanding that there will be more flexibility and more movement within the workforce, but embracing that, because once someone leaves to move to another business, you'll replace that person with skills from another complementary industry. So I think we need to think more holistically around these 6 industries and those skills that we're sharing amongst us, not just kind of the individual workforce that's been trained up by a single organization.
Mm-hmm. Could I pass the button back to Lee again? Lee and NSERC have done quite a few things around diversity, engagement, and being able to access sort of early careers. So Lee, I just wonder if you could tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think listening to Sarah, we could talk for weeks and weeks about all these wonderful challenges that we've got and topics. I think it's obviously, for me, it's obviously really interesting. Just going back to Sarah's point on the challenges or different expectations of those generations, I have to agree in terms of that career vision is quite strong. They want it to be very clear, and they want to have that end result and goal in sight. And I think we have to consider and providing that scope for those early careers, future talent coming through. Otherwise, they will lead to go to a company or a different sector that can provide that career pathway. And also linking to that social value, working in, I suppose, early careers and early talent for many years, that social value has really started to take an upward trend quite quickly. When I'm speaking to people about what attracts people to graduate programs or to employees generally, it's very much on that CSR element. What do we return back to that to society? So that's quite interesting, and I totally agree, Sarah, with all your statements. So to give you some further context in some of the other I suppose initiatives, we as an organisation value diversity quite significantly. We understand that diversity of thought, that diversity piece is absolutely integral to the sustainability of skills and the success of the sector and the business going forward. So linking to that, we understood that we wanted to make sure that GLAS as a sector, but also NSERC specifically, we could provide credible careers as a career route for everybody. So looking at all the protected characteristics, and what we wanted to do was look at how we can educate and increase awareness of the sector, the careers within the sector and NSERC, and expose some of those hidden careers that aren't necessarily front and center on that jobs market shelf. Some of the more excuse the pun, but more sexy careers, such as product designers, using really fancy technology, just to allow people to be more aware and have a bigger window to view GLAS, to view NSERC in. So part of that was to develop a Women in Manufacturing diversity charter. So that was spearheaded by our recent accreditation through the Diversity Mark accreditation in Northern Ireland. And as part of that accreditation, we wanted to ensure that we had 3 strong initiatives which really did make progress and have some traction in what we're trying to achieve. So we developed a diversity charter for the organisation, which pledged to do a number of things, such as include females on recruitment panels, to ensure that any job advertisements were written to be as inclusive as possible. and to see where possible we could have an X number of females per crew per shift. So we were trying to do as much as we could as a commitment to do that. If you want to have a look at that further, it is on our website. As part of that, linking back to some of the other kind of conversations we've been having, is around Tracy's point on the community engagement. And we have recently scoped out a program called HOCAM, HOCAM, which stands for Helping Our Communities Achieve More. And in essence, that's exactly what Tracy was talking about. It's how can we as an organisation and leaders in our sector begin to engage with hard to reach groups, because we have a responsibility, I believe, to really make a difference. So that is through veterans, that's exploring what that looks like in terms of returners, even ex-offenders, and also schools and communities, because we're very passionate, and I personally am passionate about the grassroots type of awareness piece. We know through forecasts that those colleagues who will be joining us in 10 years are currently in year 6 and year 7 in school. So what are we doing proactively to engage our future workforce, albeit 10 years down the line? So we have also established a women's network called Women in Manufacturing, which is very successful, and they are a strategic partner to some of the decisions that are made in the business, and we are very proud in what we've achieved so far with that, but we have such a long way to go with the HOCAM project, with implementing the charter, and ensuring that we do what we can for our communities. Lots and lots.
Lots and lots of good stuff. And I'm sure sort of, the Glass Futures facility will be able to help, and we'll certainly
absolutely. The Glass Futures is, I suppose, a fundamental part for that to be successful, and we already work very closely with Glass Futures, and we intend to leverage that relationship as much as we can, understanding that we're both working towards the same goals and that shared responsibility to do what we can for the future of glass. Making sure it's still around in 50 years.
Excellent. I'll just dip over to Simon, because Simon has quite a bit of experience in engineering doctorates, and I just wanted to kind of explore that as well, as a view to a more practical route that is available.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I'd written down this to interrupt and talk a bit about that, but I'll pick a couple of things up first as I work my way into that bit, because building on what Sarah and Lee have said, I think there's a variety of routes in. There's no one solution that fits all. So we support a program called GUTS, very nicely worded, isn't it? Get Up to Speed, which is held in Sheffield, which is to try and get school kids interested in engineering and science. So I think one of the things that we as the foundation industry should do quite a lot of that in there, get people thinking about engineering and science at that level. They might then be the feeds into university courses, or they might go into the apprentice route. And most of my colleagues in the different steel businesses have got their own engineering training centres, and they happen to be the people who I think probably the kind of the longest serving people in the organisation. They kind of get into it and they're in for a long time. In fact, that's an interesting thing about the business we're in. We've actually got a remarkably low turnover of people, but we're not very good at handling fast turnover, which is the modern way. And I guess it's the old folks like me that kind of need training in that a bit, because I don't think we fully understand how to manage people coming into the organisation quickly, and perhaps accepting that they're only going to be there for a few years and go on to something else and bring in other people in. So I have to be quite fast with that. But at a kind of a post university level, and to pick up on what Professor Zhao was saying, I think it really is important to kind of get into the kind of teaching materials itself for universities. We support universities with a lot of teaching materials themselves, and visit programs, and some really quite nice experimentation that people can do either in the lab and sometimes on plants, where we do trial rolling of materials for them and things like that. But what had been really, really successful for us, it's been very successful for Tata Steel, successful for my business and for British Steel as well, is actually the engineering doctorate program. And so here we had the advantage of people coming in. So they've had some basic university level training in science and technology and the kind of tools that they need for daily work. But their 4-year program is based on site, and they'll go back and visit universities for their teaching, but they're learning to apply their knowledge in a real world situation, and actually sitting in a pulpit next to a steel plant operator or a rolling mill operator. And I think it has benefits in so many ways. One is this means that effectively, as a company, we're getting somebody in who's actually learning alongside it. It's an extended interview, let's be honest about it. And at the end of that 4-year program, we've got somebody that's oven ready to come into the business. And if they're not, we've certainly learnt about that early on, that maybe they just don't fit for whatever reason. That's turned out to be quite rare, because people get excited about doing this stuff, excited about the projects. If you ever have the opportunity to go and see the engineering doctorate displays that are held at Swansea University with Tata Steel, it really is tremendous. There's some 30 odd people that are involved in that, and they do real problems in there. For the individual themselves and for the students, they're learning in a real environment, and they're experimenting in the real world. They're understanding what the costs of making decisions are, what the cost of experimentation means. And like those of us in the business, you know, they live by successes and failures. Not every bit of experimentation works, but they might then realize if they've wasted a cost, they've wasted quite a considerable sum of money. But that's the real world. We'll deal with that every day. And it helps people to understand. And from the universities, they get somebody that's training and bringing some of that other knowledge back into the department and helping to tailor the courses and the training so that it really does meet the requirements that are necessary. And so these big programs of engineering doctorates, I think, help all 3 parties extremely well. And I must say, I have to be careful how I say this. I'm sat here with a PhD, but I'd rather take somebody with an engineering doctorate degree than a PhD. Don't be too upset, Sarah. But the issue is actually, I think, because they come in with that kind of oven ready set of training here, and it's really helpful. Everybody benefits from it, and maybe that addresses Professor Jar's comments as well about how do you get more engaged with the universities and create the training that is necessary for industry.
Mm-hmm. So what we're kind of saying is there's 3 parts to it. We need to engage with the schools. I'm saying I'm talking about maybe the foundation industries and glass specifically, is you engage with the schools, you engage with the college and the apprenticeship kind of area, and then you engage with the doctorate level and the engineering, and have some means of a career progression or access to that. Yeah. That'd be a fair.
That's right, and accept the fact that in the modern world, people will move around. We're fortunate enough not to employ people in a prison, so people can move, and you just have to accept that, and you have to have the processes in the business that allows people to come in and learn. You really want to encourage them to stay. At the end of the day, if they want to go on, it's morally not even right to try and persuade them. Let them move on, allow other people to come in, but you've got to be able to get people up to speed quite quickly. You've got to get them on board, and you've got to have processes that enable to do that. And I must say, in my own business, we're not especially good at bringing people in at relatively short notice. We kind of expect people like me to have been employed for 32 years. And because I suppose it's easy, you know, I've learned over 32 years a few things, but to try and build training programs for people that might expect in the modern world to work in a company for 2 or 3 years and then move on to something else. But they bring so much more with them. So we're doing some work at the moment with another company that works in the chemical sector on digital twins, creating digital twins of our rolling mills and allowing us to actually see parts of the plant that we wouldn't normally be able to get access to successfully. These are fantastic employees coming in because they've actually bring that learning from a different industry. It's still a foundation sector. And they're bringing things in and said, you could do it this way, or you could look at things that way. And it helps us to sort of think outside the box.
Okay, I'll just pass the baton over to Tracy because Tracy wants to discuss wider accessibility, which I think is quite relevant to the 3 streams. Okay,
yeah,
Tracy?
Thank you. I think your summary there of the three streams was right. I don't have any quibble with that. I suppose I would just add in just the sort of the ability really to engage with local providers of other employment services. And what I'm thinking about there is looking a bit broader across the local area for the sort of workforce that you need, whether it's short-term or long-term, and at whatever level, because there may well be organizations locally that are able to give you access to people who are either out of work or have some sort of other background from local employment, which would be of use to your employment. So there's funding, for example, for pre-employment training, adult education funding, and there's also things like traineeships, which young people can access to get them ready before they can go into roles. And they don't need to be long-term roles, but short-term roles in your organizations. So I think it's perhaps being slightly broader in casting your net and looking around for local providers who are perhaps different from the standard FE colleges, but who would be able to access funding that can get some of those groups through to roles that you're looking to fill at whatever level. I'm also thinking about overlapping with other local industries. So in St. Helens, there's an awful lot of engineering employment. It's not just a large, deep set of skills around skilled manual assembly and process operatives, etc. So it's not just the foundation industries, but there's also other industries in the local area who would be able to perhaps provide, if they're downsizing, there were opportunities to then add in a few skills to that cohort of people coming out of those industries and make them ready for trials or for placements or for consideration for further training for new roles going forward. So I think just look a tiny bit wider in order to sort of cast the net a bit broader, really, rather than the traditional sort of apprenticeships, colleges and universities sources.
Mm-hmm. What's the best way for an employer to engage in that?
Well, I would say ring us up and start the conversation. So that's probably my answer to that, really. And you can start with your local FE college, or start with an independent training provider, your local authority, something like your local LEP, or of course a Chamber of Commerce if they're a training provider locally.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to add a little bit on apprenticeships, Tracy, and the availability of, or the kind of pull that they have in the area, and whether or not that there's more that we can do to engage with them?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I must admit, I'm not sure. Apprenticeships have gone through a lot of change recently, and I'm not sure what apprenticeship standards are most relevant for the people on the call. There are basic apprenticeship standards around the sort of level that we would deliver, which would be level 2 to 5. So that might be in things like process operatives or manufacturing operations. There's also obviously the whole set of IT apprenticeships. I would say that there's an enormous number of apprenticeships, and new standards are being developed all the time. So just like Professor Jar said, encouraging you to get involved in talking to universities about tailoring courses. And Simon's talked about tailoring the engineering doctorate, which I think is a really good option there. I would say actually talk to local apprenticeship providers about what they could offer and how you might want to tailor it, because a lot of apprenticeships, obviously you have to do what we call off-the-job training. So you're doing your academic work alongside your on-the-job training, and you can tailor it according to what the job role is that you want the person to do. I would also think slightly out of the box. It sort of surprised me when I started working for St. Helens Chamber. Actually, people are still doing apprenticeships at 50 plus years of age. So I think at the moment our youngest apprentice is 16, but our oldest is 64. So apprenticeships can be for any age, and lots of different modules can go in to make them really, really suitable for the jobs that you have available. The other point to make, I think, is that I know not many organisations in these industries would be SMEs, but for SMEs, apprenticeships are 90% funded by the government. For large organisations, you pay for an apprenticeship out of your apprenticeship levy pot. So given that you're paying that money anyway, it's actually a very cost-effective way to use it. If you don't use it up, it goes to the Treasury and you lose it anyway. And you can do apprenticeships in things like management. I mean, certainly locally, I would say that firms are often importing senior level people. So a managing director or a marketing director or a finance director, those sorts of things. And you can actually use apprenticeships to grow your own in those areas, those business areas that are slightly different to your production and development side of things. So I'd think quite broadly around apprenticeships and perhaps sit down with someone to talk that through, if that sounds of interest.
Okay, it's just draw attention to a comment that has been posted that the Job Centre can also arrange sector work academy programs, which consists of an open day, some pre-employment training from a local training provider, and there's lots of these with national employers with great success. So that's certainly worth following up. I'm probably just going to hand the baton back to Sarah and see if she would talk about her VR outreach program.
Yes, it's not mine, it's yours. But yes, so I think just a few things to pick up on really from the discussion. So the next stage of our future skills work is to bring together a collaborative group from across the foundation industries to look at things like apprenticeship standards and degree standards, and try and facilitate that collective voice interacting with our training providers and our universities. So from anyone from not just GLAS, but across the foundation industries who's interested in that, please do get in touch with us, and we'll make sure that you're involved in that next stage, because we do want to help facilitate that communication as much as possible, and help get those closer links across. So in terms of the VR outreach, I guess really this is a broader point that COVID has opened us up to a lot of different ways of working and different ways of training and learning. And so we know there's a lot more potential to work, not just on a local level, but also on a national level. Tracy mentioned the point about SMEs having most of their apprenticeship cost funded. But actually across the UK, we have so many SMEs in the foundation industries that maybe have one apprentice per year or one every 2 years. And independently, there's not enough local demand to run a foundation industry training program. So can we use our better digital abilities now to form cohorts across the UK, to have that training together, to use Zoom to receive some of that education, to move to more of a boot camp program, so you get kind of intensive weeks of practical training, and use VR alongside that to do some more practical things within the workplace, but without the health and safety risks. I know VR is being planned to be used extensively across the foundation industries, not just in training, where it does allow you to, as Simon said, see into areas that you couldn't previously see into, but also practice and hone the techniques without being in that dangerous environment, but also bring the environment into schools and into universities to get that real experience of what a plant feels like and looks like, that's currently missing from the kind of theoretical lectures and from school lessons, because the scale is immense, the speed is immense, and sometimes just getting that feeling is that first step in introducing people to the industries, that they're not dirty, they're not stifled environments to be working in, they're really exciting, they're full of technology, and that's the image that we really need to get out there. So I think Glass Futures is working with the Institute of Physics to look at how we can embed some of these outreach ideas in, and I'm sure we'll be involved later on down the line, but definitely something to keep an eye out for.
Okay, I'm just going to break over to Professor Jar again. He wanted to just raise a few comments on that. So the floor is yours, Animesh.
All right, thank you. I really appreciate the the cross section of the discussion we have had. One group which we definitely need to bring on board is the professional bodies like Institute of Physics, Sarah just mentioned. Institute of Materials will be very important here. Chemical engineering. By the way, chemical engineering subject as in engineering attracts a lot of female. We know we have huge amount of record for entry. This is absolutely brilliant in terms of creating the scheme which women in manufacturing, you talk, Lee, that would be very nice thing to do across the sector, TFI sector, not just the glass sector. What I think is most expensive currently for the universities is the adoption of the digital technology, which Sarah, you talking about VR. VR is expensive. And how do we support VR activities? And whether there is a Higher Education Funding Council together with Innovate UK and UKRI with industry partnership can help us to develop that. That will be very, very nice. I don't know whether Richard Katz is still online, but Richard knows our Deputy Vice Chancellor for Learning and Teaching, Professor Peter Jimak. Maybe he could, he's the board member of the Glass Futures Limited. Maybe we could initiate discussion to cut across the N8, the Northern 8 universities, and create a platform for digital and VR platform. I do think that is a transformational. And I'll again conclude, you mentioned, Sarah, about not going into dangerous environment and learning. And we are already doing similar sort of thing for medicine area where surgeons learn VR techniques before they engage into very difficult surgical procedures. So it is an opportunity, and I think COVID has brought this opportunity at our doors, and we should definitely take it on. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I will pass the baton over to Aston, who has a few bits to say on global outreach.
Will do, thanks. I'll hand over to you afterwards, Richard, if you want to comment on animeshes. But I think, in particular, the opportunity to be globally connected better than before is a really interesting one. Myself and Mark earlier on were actually talking about office space, meeting room space at St Helens. Now, what was funny is we're looking at the office space requirements and actually started talking about the fact that people might attend meetings in the same building, but virtually. And it's not anything I'd ever thought about before, because once you start thinking about walking from one end of a building to another, the human interaction is important, but all of a sudden 15 minutes of your day are gone now. It's an interesting concept to think that, we might have a meeting in the same building where everyone's in the same place, but everyone's actually on their own equipment somewhere else in this platform, because actually it's become such a norm nowadays. I think one of the opportunities that we have with this is that the foundation industry challenges that exist, that we're talking about in the context of the UK with the UK apprenticeship schemes, etc., is that actually globally there's a real opportunity for these skill sets and requirements, for us to take a leading role in terms of developing this, but actually pulling people in across the international platforms that we see. I think front and center from my perspective of Glass Futures is that this is a globally unique research platform that does have the opportunity to impact a global industry. And I think, the challenges that we see with carbon leakage, where industries from across Europe and North America are being lost to places where the cost of carbon is significantly lower. And part of the challenge of ensuring these processes and industries stay in Western society is that actually we have to attract and be the best at what we do. And I think that what we learn through this process and what we develop, we have to have a keen eye to make sure that, globally, it's something that we try and attract the global partners in, because greater than the sum of your parts is very important. And the UK foundation industries have all got a common challenge, but a glass plant is a glass plant, and anywhere you go in the world, as long as you've got that experience of what a furnace looks like and how it operates, you can pretty well guarantee that anywhere you go in the world, you're going to see a similar process. And it truly is a common language, these technical aspects of engineering and science. And I'm an engineer by trade, and it's the thing that I've always found enjoyable, is that no matter what a language barrier is, when you look at a drawing or when you put on a VR headset and you look at a process, the language becomes a lot less of a difficulty, because actually you're dealing with a common machine and common parts and common needs. So I think the opportunity here to pull in the global partners is one that I just want to make sure is sort of thought about as we go through the rest of the process. So thanks for bringing in, Mark. I don't know, Richard, if let's see, you've come off your camera, if you wanted to sort of respond to Animesh.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Richard.
Animesh, how nice to see you again. And what sensible contributions. Thank you very much, and thank everybody else very much. And for those who don't know me, I'm the Chief Exec of Glass Futures, and I have to say a lovely process which we've just been entertained by 4 very interesting and clever speakers. But returning to Animesh, yes, of course, I do indeed know your new Deputy VC at the University of Leeds, Nick Plant, and he and I have started a dialogue, I suppose is the best way of describing it, on all sorts of different levels. In due course, we really hope to be able to see that there's a satellite entity of Glass Futures on the new external campus at the University of Leeds, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. However, overall, what Glass Futures, one of our fundamental aims is to reach out to education, to encourage STEM subjects. And education starts quite young, I'm told nowadays, being slightly older than the average person. But we want to really encourage science, engineering, industry, and try and change the perception. One of the words that Simon described the industry is it's not a very sexy industry. And I'm not blaming you, Simon, by saying it's not a very sexy industry, but it's true. The perception is that heavy industry is heavy and dirty. We've got to change that as part of our process to encourage youngsters to come into our industries. And we've got to do our own bit and clean ourselves up. And one of the essences of Glass Futures is to present a really effective and modern environment for hands-on training. Obviously, they're not going to be 5-year-olds at hands-on, but I hope that teenagers will be able to come and look to see what we're doing. We want to be open access, not just to the industry and supply chain, but to education, and at all age groups above the safety level. And it's part of working with universities, working with colleges, working with local institutions, chambers of commerce, employment agencies, both commercial and state, and make certain that we project and provide the right environment to encourage youngsters to get involved. And maybe they'll all stay on if we provide the right environment and we continue to modernize in line with it. Maybe we can all do a Simon Pike and stay for 32 years. But thanks, Animesh. Good to talk to you, and I hope we'll get together again shortly.
Okay, we've probably got about 15 minutes left, so we just wanted to really push into question and answers, really, for any of the panelists or anyone who's spoken today. So shall I hand you over to Robbie?
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, we've only got one question from listeners at the moment, so I think it's probably one for Aston. So I'll just read it out, Aston. It's from Scott. Thanks for your question, Scott. After the facility is built, how will the ongoing operations be funded? Through private contracted R&D project, or is ongoing operations publicly funded as well?
I think the answer really is in the question from Scott overall. So, the approach as a research and technology organisation is to essentially work on collaborative part-funded projects, but then also to work on private projects as well. We really do see that supporting training and development of people into the industry is a very valuable thing that the industry requires and needs as well. And we see that as one of the future income streams as well, is actually to provide a platform for others to use to train people more effectively on. So it really is a combination of public and private work all together for the ongoing operations. So I don't know if there is any further questions. I'll pose a question. I don't know if anyone across the panel wants to pick it up, but
I have a question for Tracy. I think it will be very useful for us to cross-collaborate amongst the various regions in the north. I know you are at St. Helens Chamber. Leeds City has 3 different glass companies and supporting. So I think doing an enterprise kind of thing with Leeds, our business school engage quite a lot with the Leeds City Council. It will be very useful to do that. I think that way we can also cross-subsidize activities and the type of things which Sarah mentioned. And if we can come together and develop a common platform for VR, etc., that will be very useful. Being professor, I feel privileged because I see how steel is made, how glass is made, how chemicals are produced, and there are some very common threads which we can collectively develop. And that would apply to all across the field. For example, digital twin, plants. How do you create a digital plant? That you can develop very clearly using emerging technologies and software, census technology, applications. All those things can be very, very nicely developed. Thank you.
Am I okay to respond, Chair? Yeah. Thank you for that suggestion. And yes, that's very positive. I think I know I'd like to work in that way. I think what would be fantastic would be to pick up on something that Sarah said as well, which is just to develop a sort of a set of resources that could be used for promotion. So whether we're out talking in schools or obviously working with Trish on sector-based work academies and encouraging young people and older people into the industry, then across the different regions and the different geographies, if we can share information, share resources and tools like that, and make sure that people who are attracted into the industry can go to the provider level or go in at the level that they find most appropriate. So yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks, Professor Jar.
Ashton, I've got another question here. I'm not sure it's going to be for you, but it's from Stephen Bedson. Thanks, Stephen. Social mobility is a huge issue in St. Helens. Do the panel know of any STEM organisations or employers, or have any examples of any entry-level pathways that could help shape access to employment opportunities for those young people furthest away from the labour market? Any volunteers to pick that up?
I don't mind maybe explaining some of the stuff that we're doing. So thanks, Stephen, for your question. Obviously, Elton is, I think, about 45 minutes away from St. Helens, but we have just launched our Ignite apprenticeship program, which looks at supporting anybody who wants to enter the glass industry on their early entry pathway into that, linked with the HOCUM project. looking at those people who are furthest away from the labour market. Going forward, I'd love to explore that with Aston and Glass Futures in terms of a collaborative apprenticeship programme to see how NSERC and Glass Futures and other industries can work collectively in doing that. So I've just seen that. I'm not too sure whether that answered your question, but I hope that it's provided a little bit of insight of our ambition in terms of what we want to achieve alongside Glass Futures.
Thanks, Lee.
I think just to add on to that as well, I think so I noticed I think it's from Trish again as well. So the vacancies being created at the facility. So I mean, over the course of the next few years, we expect in the region of about 80 full-time jobs at the facility. But in particular, to Simon's point about fast turnover for staff, one of the things that I believe Glass Futures must do, we're not here to be a commercial production facility that's designed to produce the same product for 20 years. Part of our product is really to bring people on board, to give them the experience and to allow them to go on and find jobs and employment that's better for them in the long term and the career in future, with the intention that then that provides additional spaces and pathways for other people to come through. And I'm determined to ensure that Glass Futures has got the people and skills that it needs to do the work it needs to do, but also that we ingrain the concept that to prepare people to go out into an industry and have a big long-term impact. And that global outreach for the glass industry, for the steel sector, the chemical sector, the skills and knowledge that you can gain from working in a glass factory type environment will equip you to be able to find a job almost anywhere in the world. And I think in terms of social mobility for the region in particular, there's a real big opportunity for social mobility to be hugely increased by becoming what is essentially an international gateway to industrial jobs. The reality is in a globally connected world, some of that does involve moving and relocating and finding employment elsewhere and bringing those skills back into the region maybe in 10 or 15 years time. That's part of the social mobility piece, which is not always about staying locally, but it's about opening people up to the opportunities that exist, at Elton, just down the road, not that far away, but then also the other end of the M62 corridor where you've got the likes of the steelworks at Scunthorpe or, other glass plants located all the way across the M62, all the way out to smaller short-term expat jobs that exist out in the Middle East where people go, earn good money, get exceptional skills, and then come back into significantly better jobs in the UK after a small amount of time served. I think that's the social mobility opportunity that we've got with Glass Futures, in particular for those people in the local region.
Aston, I believe you were going to ask a question earlier.
I was going to, but I've been usurped really. It's sort of come up, so I'll not pose the same question again. Is it worth rounding up and saying thank you across the board, Robbie?
Yeah, I think so. There's no further questions. Just wanted to say a big thanks to everyone today. Thanks to the panelists. It's been great to meet you all. Thanks for the input from the listeners, and thanks Professor Jar for your input too. We'll be holding some further sessions in the future. We've got no dates booked in as yet, but we'll make sure that everybody gets an invite and it'll be all over our social medias, etc. If anyone's interested in joining as a member, please give us an email or a call, which will be on the slide deck. I think that's about it, unless you want to add anything, Richard, before we close the call. We've got a couple of minutes.
No, I think I've done my preaching already. But
thank you, everyone.
Thank you, because we're a young business, and I'm quite an elderly individual. And some of the comments that were made about we older ones need to understand the changing manner of life. Fortunately, I've always been an early adopter, and technology is one of my loves. So I don't have a problem with the latest methods of communicating and social media. But it's important that industry starts to pursue that, because if we don't, and I'm sorry, this is another preach, but if we don't make ourselves seen and heard in the environment which youngsters live now, there's no reason that they would ever want to come and join us, because the relatively negative PR that seems to be persuasive on the steel industry and its ups and downs doesn't really encourage youngsters. But we need to change the message. We need really to be making certain that the future, and this is Great Britain PLC, this isn't just for the glass industry, just for the steel industry. We wouldn't exist as a nation without our foundation industries, but they're taken for granted, and we need to make certain that everybody in the country is significantly aware of the opportunities, every youngster. And we also, and pointing particularly at Sarah, need to continue to encourage government to invest in the foundation industries. And I don't want to say invest better, but invest in a manner that is cohesive. And what we've been talking about here is training and training provision in one manner or another. There is some investment, but it's from a different direction and isn't necessarily helpful, shall we say, or is it easy access for industry? But we Glass Futures will be trying to set a new direction. I've spent my life, and I'm sorry now I'm going to digress a little bit. I spent my life as a disruptor, and we need to disrupt all sorts of elements in the foundation industries and in the training provision. Now we can do online training in a very different way to that which we've done historically. All right, the Open University's always tried it and pretty successfully, but not targeted, and now we need to target. Anyway, I shall not continue with my preaching. You'll all get bored, but thank you very much indeed for attending today.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a good Easter.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks,
Thank you very
everyone.
much, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks.